Welcome, everyone, to the Appconomy podcast channel. I'm here with Raj Singh. Raj has a very unique title. He's Entrepreneur in Residence at SRI. Raj, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you, Tom. Good morning.
And what exactly is Entrepreneur in Residence?
This is probably a longer conversation. There's many definitions of EIR within a VC and within an R&D lab. I've been an EIR at a VC, and obviously this is my first time being an EIR at an R&D lab. But effectively, what it means is we like you, and we want you to come in and help us create a new company. And so in the context of an R&D lab, they obviously have technology that goes unused. So SRI specifically will bring in EIRs to try to evaluate a particular piece of technology to see if there's an opportunity to spin it out into a new company.
Thanks for being on the show today. This is really a good thing because I think what you had to say about enterprise mobility and phones and apps and where things are going for this year was really just spot on. So I'm going to start with the point that you brought up right at the beginning of your talk, which was this idea of virtual phones. One personal, one for the enterprise, basically two SIMs and one piece of hardware. What was your motivation for saying that from an enterprise perspective?
So I think during the talk I was talking a little bit about some of the disruptive trends or just trends that were occurring the next 5-10 years, or actually it was more near term. But the notion of dual profile phones or virtual phones, it makes sense in a lot of different instances. So if you look at it from the enterprise perspective, more and more employees are allowed to use their own device within the enterprise. So this is in some ways what's driven this entire mobile device management economy or ecosystem that's beginning to form. But basically what that means is an employee is using their own device, so it's individually liable as opposed to corporate liable, to access corporate data. From the enterprise perspective, obviously what that means is they need to make sure that if they're installing an application on that device that's able to access their data, that it's secure, that they could remote wipe it, that no other application that individual installs onto his device can affect the corporate data or try to break into the corporate data or steal any of that. So that's one side of it. The other side of it, of course, is if the individual's using their own phone, do they expense part of their monthly bill to the enterprise? You are starting to see, yeah, exactly. So you're starting to see this interesting phenomenon of some of the apps being distributed through the App Store at the employee, invoicing automatically every month. And the reason they're sending the employee an invoice every month is so they can more quickly file their expense report. But so there's sort of this nebulousness in how do you get compensated? How does that work? So I'm not sure who, but someone came up with the idea of dual profile on the device. And so the concept would be you'd have a consumer profile, which would have all your consumer applications, conceivably, if done right, would be in its own memory space, its own storage. And so it's very, very secure from the standpoint that it can't touch the enterprise profile. And the enterprise profile may contain an app store of apps that the enterprise has approved. It would be a closed memory space. They wouldn't have to worry about sort of some of those security issues, data crossing over, et cetera, et cetera. But the secondary advantage, at least from an operator perspective, is they can then attach two different cellular plans to the device. So you could have a cellular plan from that the consumer pays for himself, and you could have a cellular plan that the enterprise pays for. So there's a very clear separation of data usage, communication, et cetera. I think the big question, and so obviously you can figure out why the operators are incentivized, because this is a way to double their number of subs without actually doubling the number of subs. But anyways, where I was going was, I think the big unknown is, what is the user experience? Nobody really knows how is this going to work. You get a call from your buddy who's a work buddy. Well, is that a work call or is that a personal call? Which profile pops up? Is it just for apps or is it for SMS as well? Right? Does the corporation own the data in the enterprise profile, or does the or they don't own the data in either profile. So it's great in theory, but we haven't yet seen the implementation. It might end up looking like Windows Desktop, and you have to log in and out, and that's too much work.
Raj, let's take a look at HTML5 adoption in 2011 versus native apps.
So within the enterprise, you really have two kinds of applications being built. So you have what are often called, point solutions, which is internal IT departments within the enterprise building an application for their employees. And what's interesting is the trend in that segment has been very much an adoption of frameworks that they could use, such as Row Mobile, Appcelerator, PhoneGap, etc., to rapidly build those applications as quickly as they can and such that it runs across devices. So these are HTML5, whatnot, HTML-based frameworks. Sort of write once, compile, run everywhere. That makes absolute sense. They're building an internal app. It's for their employees. The argument could be made that if it's for internal uses only, UI is not paramount. The argument could also be made that it's okay if there are a couple bugs because this is for our employees. They can deal with it. This is not for our customers. The second scenario is if you're a third-party company selling into the enterprise, you're probably selling something that's a lot more horizontal. You could be selling something more vertical, and then that's probably more of an enterprise sale. But if you're targeting the individual, the knowledge worker himself, the enterprise worker himself, you're probably selling something more horizontal. In that case, I think the decision of whether you're using HTML5 or native as your development framework, I think basically can be compared to the same kind of decision you would make if you were doing a consumer application. Certainly you have to think of, do you need to encrypt the data? Do you need to do an HTTPS connection? Security sort of 360. But enterprise apps for sure are by far simpler than most consumer apps because they tend to be some variation of a form-based application. We haven't seen that sort of next wave of more consumerization within IT. And so that lends itself very well to HTML5 as a development framework, since you don't necessarily need to do native code access, and HTML5 does allow sort of pre-caching of pages, which could work well. So I'm certainly a big fan of HTML5, but I very much look at it from the perspective of it's really a development framework question. Ultimately, you're wrapping it as a native app, so you can distribute it through the App Store. I think a great example, I was just playing with New York Times yesterday, and their new version of the app is done in HTML5. So for certain kinds of applications, it's fantastic.
Okay, so Raj, last question. Anything you want to add in here of particular interest that you're following in this area?
There's a couple trends within the enterprise that I think are pretty exciting. So one, never before has data become so available. So traditionally, enterprise has been on-premise systems. Data's locked up. You have to do systems integration to get access to those systems. More and more enterprise services are moving to the cloud. So that's a great macro trend and something an application developer can take advantage of from the standpoint of being able to access that data and do something cool with it. Two, phenomenal smartphone, tablet distribution into the enterprise. So I think from a mobile perspective, great opportunity to sort of leverage that and think of mobile-specific use cases that could be beneficial to these employees. But three, I think also equally important is the fact that you can now target the individual. Dropbox did that, Evernote does that, Yammer does that. They go directly at the employee, and in some ways it's the reverse way of penetrating the enterprise. Typically, you would go to the VP of sales or the IT group or whatever it might be, and you do an enterprise sale. Now you're going at the individuals themselves. The individuals are adopting it. The individuals are paying for it themselves and expensing it. Not too different to how you upgrade to a LinkedIn Pro account and you expense that to your company. And those are translating into larger enterprise sales. So I think that sort of distribution model is quite disruptive. So I think it's a great time to be looking at enterprise applications and with tablet penetration, et cetera. So I'm excited.